everything gonna be okay. Don't worry about them. One day you gonna find your way. But hey, I didn't wanna be like them. I used to sit up in my room and turn the volume to 10. Back then it was only one, though many others tried. Competition was none. I swear there was nothing iller than chilling and watching Thriller. Nowadays they try to do it, but nothing really is realer. It didn't matter which one I'm talking. Jordan, Tyson, Jackson. See, you can fool them some of the time, but why be anyone else when you one of a kind? Come on.
It's so rough, growing up as a kid, trying hard to fit in and be original. Time goes by, and now we all grown up.
Yeah, I know what it is.
Used to look up to the stars,
back to the biz,
but
man.
now they following us.
I used to wanna be a baller, but I didn't have the ups. Ballin' at road hockey, different story with the puck. See, dreams of being an athlete, but I bite the dust when it came to a track meet. Trying to hit the dance floor, but I didn't have the move.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed those breakout sessions. Bobby, Lee, and I, we had great fun there. So thanks for joining us in those breakouts. And it's now time for our panel session, which will consider how we can lead our communities through the current crisis in ways that engage with members and engage with stakeholders. The session will also offer some ways to come through the current restrictions stronger and more resilient. And I'd like to introduce you now to our awesome moderator, Jean-Pierre Fernandez, who's the campus engagement specialist at Ryerson University. And Jean-Pierre will then introduce the rest of the panel.
Thanks so much, Bill. I'm very, very excited to be here. You're right, I am pretty awesome. No, joking. We are really excited to have this conversation today. I think, crisis is a word that we've heard a lot of this over the past year. Pivots, managing through change, all of those things are things that we've all talked about and we've all sort of had to muddle our way through. Today's conversation really is about, what do we do with that now? How do we learn from what just happened and move forward? And so we have a really incredible group of speakers with us today. I'm going to ask all of our speakers to join us. We have Shauna Fulcher, the Chief Community Officer from the Center of Social Innovation. We have Allison Schaefer, who's a speaker, an author, and a parenting expert. We have Michael Bach, who's the founder and CEO of the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, and Rena Rovinelli, who's a co-founder and the speaker of Speaker Slam. So as you can see, we have a pretty incredible cast of folks here who have some really phenomenal experiences that they want to share with you. I'm going to invite our speakers to introduce themselves, and then once they have, we'll jump right into the conversation. Maybe we'll kick it off with Shauna.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today and giving us an opportunity to talk about community. Community is definitely what I've been living and breathing for the last 10 years. And I think probably even before then, I think I was raised to it. I think my grandfather brought it to me as a child, and it's been a part of my blood ever since then. And it's been a tough year for community, so I'm pretty excited to be here repping the Center for Social Innovation and to be talking about something so near and dear to my heart today.
Thanks, Shauna. I'll throw it over to Allison.
Hi. Well, again, it is a tremendous pleasure to be here. I'm so thankful that the organizers are bringing us together for these important conversations. I bring to the table the parenting perspective. I'm a family counselor as well as an author and a speaker, and I've been working intimately with families throughout the crisis. So I've had sort of a firsthand look at the pressures and the experiences they've been going through them. And I've been really enlightened by the community conversation that we're embarking on today. Our speakers already this morning have been fantastic, so I'm really looking forward to digging into this with the rest of our panelists today.
Thank you so much. Michael, I'll throw it over to you.
Thanks, TP. I bring the diversity perspective, and it is a different conversation. It's something I've been very concerned about, is how the pandemic is impacting various community organizations that have a diversity and inclusion focus. So happy to be here for this conversation.
Thanks so much, Michael. And lastly, Rena.
Hello, I'm the co-founder of Speaker Slam and the Emerging Speaker Training Program. For the last 5 years, we've been having events. We were on stage in person for years with people hugging each other and loving each other. and we have such a powerful community, and it's been such an interesting experience transitioning online. So I'm really happy to be here today to share about that.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Rena. As you can see, we have a really great group of people here who are coming from, different perspectives when it comes through leading communities through crisis. And so I'm going to kick it off with a bit of a broader question. Leading through a crisis is when you're truly tested as a leader, and your leadership skills really do shine through. So I want to get a sense from you, what is the most surprising thing you've had to push through, and how did you handle it over the past year? This is open to anyone. Feel free to jump in and answer as you see fit.
Certainly,
Go for it.
we're following each other.
Go ahead.
Go for it, Shauna.
Okay. So the Center for Social Innovation, for anybody out there who doesn't know what it is the home for at the beginning of this pandemic, about 500 change-making organizations across a whole diversity of subject matter areas. And we are an organization who brings people in to organizations who are looking at putting people and planet first and forging the next economy together. And so as soon as this pandemic hit, and we have a staff team of probably just over 60 people. And I think one of the most challenging things for all of us leading through this was very quickly realizing, as a very good friend of mine put it, that we had a whole organization and a whole bunch of organizations who were going through trauma together, and that everybody brings to that their own experiences, their own challenges, their own approaches, and that those approaches were changing day by day, and that we just needed to be able to come to our members and our teams in the present moment and to be able to stand and hold for them and to witness what they were doing so that we would be able to co-create a way forward together. We were able to do that with our community in some really tangible ways, which we are really proud of, and I am very proud of, but that constantly shifting ground, we knew was there, and then to see it in action required a stepping up of being able to hold space for people in a good place and people in a not good place.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Rena, did you want to add to that?
Sure. I think I thought when we first went into COVID, I was really excited by the opportunity of having all of these people at home in front of their screen, excited to watch our content and to see our speakers and to get involved in everything we were doing. And I just thought that the viewership was going to double or triple. And I wasn't anticipating that people would really have the fatigue that they have, but there's only so much learning and courses, and people quickly rally to sort of get themselves online. And now we're battling for that attention, and I wasn't expecting that. I just thought everyone would be sitting home on lockdown, ready, willing, and able to be a part of Speaker Slam, but it's been a little bit of a challenge to engage people, and we've had to be creative and think of ways to do that.
Yeah, and I think that piece around innovation and change and adaptation is really something we've all had to manage and deal with at this time, right? I think no matter what area you're in, you've had to figure it out, and you do it in the best way that you can. So I'm gonna stay with you, Rena, and I'm gonna ask you a bit more about that piece around innovation. You know, we've all had to innovate and change in this period. What have you seen within your own organization around innovation, and how did you get to that point of innovation?
For us, we had live events for so long, and we were really limited to our geographical limitations of Toronto or the GTA. And so with this experience, we were allowed to be able to expand and to go online and go global. And that has been an amazing opportunity. And it's really interesting because I know our community. And if I had broached this, if we had come to them a year ago and said, we want to do it online, we would have had a lot of resistance. And I think at the time, people would have not wanted that. I mean, there's no hugging, there's no close connection, but this has sort of allowed us to do that. And at the same time, in addition to our online competitions, it's been coming up with events that we think people really need. And we created the Amplifying Black Voices. This summer, we have Amplifying Women's Voices coming up in March, just giving different kinds of opportunities for other people to have their voice heard. And not just in the GTA. So for us, it's actually been a blessing in some ways.
I think that's something that we've all experienced within the work. Going virtual is very real. More, and especially very real for families and parents. And so, Allison, I'm going to ask you the same question. What does innovation look like, and how have we gotten to that point? Is it working? Is it not working? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So when the pandemic first hit, it was pretty clear that moms took and I say moms quite specifically, there was a bit of a gender bias here, and we saw a lot of conversation about inequities and who was suffering more during this pandemic. And so moms still are more likely in a household to be responsible for the caregiving. It's not to say other parties in the family don't step up, but moms still hold that responsibility near and dear to their hearts, and they were under a tremendous amount of pressure to juggle family, maybe adults in long-term care, organizing online schooling, try to figure out work from home, and they really felt like they needed to manage all those juggling balls. So in my business, it was really important for me to be able to deliver the kind of support that was kind of on an as need to know basis and in small digestible tidbits, because there was a lot of overwhelm. This isn't really a time for a parent to sign up for a full parenting class. They're sort of more in crisis. How do I get through the day? How do I just figure out this one piece? So I created a series of social media campaigns that were just short tips. So I started the sanity saving tip of the day on Instagram. Those were very well received. I started doing shorter little storyboards that were sort of inspirational. Just try this, just try labeling that. I shifted my practice to online family counseling, so that we were now using a HIPAA certified platform, very much like Zoom, where I could see clients, and I increased my client base because we had a lot more families in crisis, and I had a lot less speaking engagements speaking to the change. We have to remember at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of events were just flat canceled, and it took a while to ramp back up. Just like you folks are putting on this event today, I would say most people are pretty savvy at online events, but there was a real trough in there at the beginning where those things just weren't happening. And so it took people that had to pivot to do more online stuff. There was sort of a desert period while we were all figuring that piece out. But I really increased my presence. So I have like a Facebook Live that I do free, ask me a free parenting question. I used to do those monthly. I increased those to weekly. So just lots of stuff in real time as they need it, short, pragmatic, and inspirational. And parents really appreciated that concrete help.
I love that, Allison. And I think, looking at that piece around, who's on the front line, who are the ones doing the work and having to adapt to this change most immediately. And that really just sort of makes me think of some of the marginalized communities that we're seeing, those frontline workers, and how they're being impacted. I know at Ryerson, one of the things that impacted us was not all of our students had access to a laptop or Wi-Fi. And so we had to figure out how to get those students online. That was a real issue for us. And so, Michael, I'm going to throw to you and ask you, what are the challenges or issues that communities dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion, what is the challenges that they have, and how do they endure those challenges? And what has been your guidance to those communities?
Yeah, well, as I was listening to some of the other speakers, one of the challenges that we faced is the opposite effect, in that we had George Floyd murdered 2 months into the pandemic, and the whole Black Lives Matter movement began to really take hold. And so we've seen such dichotomy in this global pandemic in comparison to this explosion of such an important movement around anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism. We have been overwhelmed with work as a consequence, and there are so many things with concerns around mental health. Mental health, just as a starting point, is such a big concern. And people are living alone, not going out of the house. If they were dealing with mental health conditions before, they've been compounded. We've seen increased numbers in suicidal ideation. Big focus on mental health and mental illness. we're also at the same time also seeing significantly higher numbers amongst people of color in their experiencing of COVID. There were recent numbers around Black individuals and their hospitalization rates, which is extremely high in comparison to the population in the city of Toronto. So this has been a big concern. And at the same time, we've also got charities and nonprofits that work in the diversity and inclusion space, whether it's immigrant serving agencies, disability organizations, that are seeing their funding dollars dry up because they're not able to put on events, they're not able to deliver their services. It has been a real dichotomy. So my advice has been the overused word of 2020, pivot. Figure out how to deliver your services, figure out how to adapt. And many of them have, some of them have not.
Yeah. I certainly think that we've been seeing a lot of impact to those frontline workers, those marginalized communities. Michael, I'm going to stick with you and ask you a question around, what is our role to ensure that we're creating safer spaces for those communities to do the work that they need to do? What can we be doing as leaders to make sure that those spaces are safer, are spaces that people can thrive in? Do you have any thoughts around that?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, isn't it? And if anything, the pandemic has shot a light into the crevices of inequity, where the numbers of marginalized people working in frontline jobs and being potentially exposed to this disease, that in itself is such an important number. I think we do have a responsibility to address these inequities, and not just as employers, but as a civil society. We have a responsibility to make sure that we're creating safe space, that people have opportunity. You talk about students and Ryerson having laptops, having access to high-speed internet. 6% of Canadians do not have high-speed internet. Can't exactly work from home on dial-up. So we have a responsibility to level that playing field. And I think now more than ever, because there's been such focus on that we need to really start focusing on addressing it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's just sort of thinking about the spaces that people we assume have access to, and how do we make sure that everyone has access to those spaces, right? We make a lot of assumptions because of the places that we're, because of who we are and where we're coming from. Our social location really does inform how we perceive the world, but I think there's an opportunity for us to just look a little deeper, think a little more broadly, and see how we can make sure that those spaces are inclusive of everyone, most certainly. Rena, I want to throw a question at you. For anyone who's looking to take the lead and build communities and community events, what would you suggest is missing in the landscape and or the markets, at this moment in time?
Well, it's interesting. I look at what's out there, and I know that there's a lot of coaching and training. There's programs, there's experts, there's people rallying to have conferences. And we've learned quickly that people don't just want to sit and stare at a screen. We also have to engage them. So we have networking rooms and breakout sessions, and all of that is great. But what I know now, and what I've always known, is that people want to be seen and heard. And I think it's finding a way, I'm not going to say to completely move away from the expert model, because it's necessary, but I think creating events where we bring in people and the focus is on them. I think people can only absorb so much, so letting them have an opportunity to shine, creating events where maybe they're leading sessions, people are getting out of just watching from behind the screen, and they're more actively involved in this model. And I think if we can do that, not only are they more engaged, but they bring their community with them, and we can sort of all work together in that way.
Yeah, that real focus on our personal experience and how we can navigate those personal experiences is
JP,
quite.
can I jump on that?
Please do, yeah.
I'd like to piggyback on that. You know, again, in the parenting space, I agree. You know, there's, I think one of the successful formulas was the use of my Facebook page, which I segmented by age groups. So I have a very successful Facebook group for teens, parents of teens, and you know, the unique challenges in that age period. We saw a lot of suicidality, cutting, depression, anxiety as we went through the pandemic. And those parents in that community, I posted, I tried to make myself available as the expert. But what's amazing, to piggyback on your point, was the amount of caregiving that they did to each other, that they would share links to resources that helped them, that they could emotionally caregive one another. And that if you set the culture for your community group, again, talking about community culture is from Mohammed's keynote just prior to our panel. When you set the tone, when you set the cultural expectation for how the group will function to be supportive, so it's a moderated group, and that if you're not respectful to one another, I'll ask you to leave the group. But once you sort of set the tone and you set the expectation for the respect that we have, it's amazing, the caregiving. They don't necessarily need to hear it from the expert. They do want to hear it from the other mom who's got the 14-year-old who won't go to bed because they're playing Fortnite all night, or you know, the other mom whose kid is living in, you know, a dark bedroom and they think mushrooms are starting to grow. You know, they don't need to hear that from me. It's so much more genuine and connecting when they hear that it's a shared struggle with somebody else. So yes, we post solutions and make sure that we maintain some quality content there, but they really learn to caretake one another if you just do the initial setup of that group.
I love that. And I think, you know, something that I'm hearing what you're saying, Allison, is, you know, you are the expert of your own life. And so you know your situation, and, you know, there are professionals, and then there's, you know, you're an expert in your own experience. And so how do we leverage our own experiences to move forward? I think it's really, you know, it's a really important piece, is just honoring our own experiences. So thank you for that. Shauna, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, and just definitely vigorously agreeing with everyone here. We actually, as part of the pandemic, we were just about to take part in a pilot project out of our Regent Park location on a model that is based on something called participatory cities out of UK. We ran it, we did run it during the pandemic. We called it Everyone Every Day Toronto, and it was actually based on exactly this concept: was that in order to be really running events in spaces, you do need that community buy-in, and you get it by sort of giving people opportunities to come into the space and help co-create that themselves. But of course, immediately we didn't have a space for people to come into. We didn't have that central magnetic connector of people coming together physically. And so we had to figure out how to be able to create opportunities for people to build community in a time when they weren't allowed to hug one another. And what we ended up doing was to find a way to get people out of their houses, and we did it by sending them interactive kits. And it was actually based on this idea that we could do it on a platform like this one, but that there are lots of people who don't have access to platforms like this one, or don't have access to platforms like this one in times when they're able to focus on connecting with other people. We created a number of opportunities for people to do things in their homes and then bring them back out into the communities, and for them to be able to then gather safely at a distance and still see one another and talk about what the next step of that could be like and plan for the future, including things like planting a tree, creating a community garden. These are some of the things that the community actually co-created together, and they did it because we sent them seeds. And, you know, and this project is actually just about to go into its second phase as well, so we're hoping to be able to see more of it. But it is, you know, it wasn't about the experts. It was just about having the ability to create the space and hold the space, and that's what our experts were there for. But the community did the work, and which meant that they could connect to the work in a way that was even more important. And we see that in our microcosm inside our org spaces, but it was really interesting to sort of see it outside our walls in a community interaction.
Yeah, most definitely. I just want to remind everyone in the session, if you want to ask questions, please do type your questions and we'll make sure we get to them. I see there's a couple of questions that have already come up, but I just want to jump in or piggyback on the back of that piece, Shauna, because I think you really something you said really resonated for me, and that was the piece around, being caught off guard, right? I think a lot of people were caught off guard over the last year with what was happening with the pandemic. What do you think organizations can do in order to be better prepared for something like this in the future?
Sorry, I'm laughing because my partner works for sort of large finance, and so they tend to be a little bit more linear in putting together disaster planning, and they were absolutely not prepared for this. I can tell you that the not-for-profit sector and change-making sector and all of the people here, I've all seen them be able to pivot much more quickly than I have seen larger organizations be able to do. So honestly, it's that sort of be prepared to pivot. As hard as that is sometimes, it has been the thing that has made all the difference. And not even an ability, but a desire to be like, okay, let's change it. Let's pivot it some way. Let's flip the script. We've got a different approach. Let's just run with it and see if it works. And people will tell us if it doesn't.
Yeah, I think a part of that goes back to that innovation piece, right? It's like, because you've been forced to, you've been able to innovate and try new models and do new things that surprisingly work.
And one of the great things about this is that it breaks down the barriers that you have already. We all get stuck in our ways, right? When somebody takes it and takes your structure out from underneath you, you don't really have any choice but to be innovative. And some incredible things have grown out of that in all of these organizations, for sure.
Most definitely. Before I jump into questions from the audience, do any of the other panelists want to add to that? Because I saw a lot of nodding heads. So is that I agree, or is it I have something to add?
Well, yes, I'll say I think one of the takeaways from this pandemic that will forever change the way the workplace is that they will always view now that you cannot separate your worker from their family. And I mean, we always had wellness programs, or we had HR departments that would, maybe have some little token nod to getting you some, resources if things weren't going well through your IEP or something. But I think we now realize if you don't invest proactively in the well-being of your workforce, you can't see them as just being your commodity that shows up in the office. When they're in your office, they've got kids at home, they've got grandparents somewhere else. They're whole beings, and we will, I think, forever look at them holistically and not try to fragment them anymore. And I hope that creates the impetus for us to allow HR, who, as we saw in our opening keynote as well, talked about, this is their area of expertise, but we need to be able to get the budgets behind it. And we're not very good at proactive anything if we can't prove that bottom line. Now I think we have some data for the bottom line. If we don't do this and everyone has a mental health crisis, you don't have anyone coming to work.
I love that.
I was just going to add to that, JP, if I could. I was laughing because, of course, how do you plan for a disaster? Really, no one saw this coming. And some employers, my husband works for a large hospital, and he wasn't set up to work from home. They never thought that would be a possibility. And what makes me, the joy that comes out of this, the positive, is that women and people with disabilities in particular have been saying for decades that they wanted the ability to work from home. And so many employers said, oh, no, we can't do that, we can't do that. Apparently we can. It was just a matter of having a pandemic. I think now we'll see if and how we return to that, to what was normal.
And I would agree. I think with job sharing too. Job sharing has not been not popular here in Canada, and certainly not in the higher executive levels. It's very popular in Europe. Women want to work. Heads of household want to both caregive their children, manage a household, and contribute to the bigger culture through an occupation. And with job sharing, we can do that. People want to work 20-hour weeks. It doesn't mean you have to have a part-time menial job. You can do 20 hours a week and be a lawyer and be a marketer. So I hope that we bring those models because I think again, research and science proves those people get more done, companies thrive. It's just we're stuck in an old model, and hopefully this again shook up our static old ways.
And not just women, men do too.
Yeah.
All people want to contribute the way they want to. And I know a lot of young fathers who want to be able to make that contribution, but they can't get out of that model of go to work, in an office, do my job. Maybe this is the pivot point. Maybe this is the magic moment.
I think that is so true. I think, Michael, I'm thinking of my brother who took parental leave and got made fun of because he wanted to step out of the workplace and be a parent. And I think that, this, if anything, is showing us that you can be both, right? You can do all those things and you deserve to. So, thanks for sharing that. I want to jump to an audience question. This one is for Michael, and it's from, I think it's Ramola. And the question is there some way to tie up with big service providers like Rogers and Bell to provide free internet for those without?
Yeah, thanks, Ramola. It's a great question. Part of the problem is infrastructure. That the 6% of Canadians without high-speed internet, it's not necessarily that they can't afford it. It's that there is no line. There are no cables running DSL and high-speed internet out to those communities. There was an article in, I think, the CBC or the Globe and Mail today about a community in Quebec that doesn't have high-speed internet. And it's a matter of those companies making the investment in the communities so that everyone has access to something resembling high-speed internet, as opposed to the internet that we started with 30 years ago. There is an affordability piece, absolutely, but there's also a major infrastructure investment that has to be made.
Great, thanks for that, Michael. I know certainly there has been a lot of conversations in northern communities that just don't have the infrastructure. So whether that service is available or not is really dependent on government actions on investing in the infrastructure for it to come to them.
Sorry, JP, not just in northern communities. My parents are in Eastern Ontario and they're on satellite, and that's the best they can get, and it's not very good. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Michael. Another question from the audience, this one's to Rena. I would like to learn more about the Amplifying Women's Voices initiatives you were talking about. So can you share a bit more about those?
Sure. So we're actually having an event on March 8th on International Women's Day. It's called Amplifying Women's Voices. And it actually speaks to what I was talking about earlier about shining the light on the individual. So we have 4 powerful speakers, and we've opened it up for 16 women in our community to enter. You can just email me through speakerslam.org, and I'd love to send you a sign-up form, and we're just going to choose 16 women to just come and speak for 1 to 2 minutes. And it's wide open, anything. Like right now, I just think it's so important and relevant to just allow women to share their voice. We're going through so many different changes and challenges, and women blossom, when they're having the support of the community around them. So we're all about supporting that.
That sounds like an amazing event. I would love to promote that at Ryerson, so please share that with me. Another question from the audience. It looks like everyone wants to hear about it, so maybe we can share that information widely. Another question from the audience. This is coming from Karen Moy. And the question is, do you have any tips or best practices on how to effectively onboard or engage marginalized groups in the community? And is there a way to build an online community to ensure that all voices are being heard?
I feel like that's for me to answer.
Probably, yeah. I would imagine so.
I think the best way to onboard and engage with marginalized communities is about an openness, is about respect, a willingness to learn and embrace difference. And I don't know that we have a lack of online spaces. I feel like we have an overabundance of online spaces. Whether or not they're used is an open debate. But I think when it comes to creating safe space for marginalized communities, it's really about asking those communities what they need, what will help to ensure that it's a safe space for them. There's an old phrase, what is it? Of course, now I can't remember it. Nothing without us. Now I'm telling
Nothing about us without us.
Thank you. I don't know. My brain just said, no, I'm not going to scare you. Nothing about us without us, which is about involving the communities that we're trying to help. And it's certainly that's been used amongst Indigenous communities, where people who are not Indigenous are making decisions for those communities. And I would say the same of any marginalized community, but it's about welcoming them in and asking them what they need.
Yeah, most certainly. I think making sure people are at the table to contribute to whatever it is that you're creating is incredibly important. There's a question from Pam around competencies. So what competencies and skills should we be developing in order to be ready to pivot? And they're looking at what organizational competencies and skills. And I wonder whether, maybe Rena, if you want to target that, or Sharon. Sorry.
Shona, that's okay.
I don't know why I said that. Shauna, I apologize.
My favorite sort of mispronunciation I've ever gotten was Shira, so I'm good with it.
Oh, Princess of Power.
Princess of Power, exactly. So I work in an entrepreneurial area, and I'm going to say entrepreneurial mindset and culture. You want an organization that's ready to pivot, you do need to be able to be building that into the culture and weaving it into the very fabric of your organization from the get-go. And you do that by creating an opportunities for, believe it or not, a little bit of play and a little bit of exploration, and creating sort of permissive spaces for people to be able to bring ideas forward, so that when you find yourself in a situation where those ideas need to be brought forward quickly, then you've got teams who are willing to be able to step to the front, and you need to listen. Your leadership needs to be able to listen to what is coming up from your teams on the ground level, what is coming up from your communities, and to be able to put it into practice and to iterate and learn and try again. You build it right in at the front end, and there are some core competencies out there for entrepreneurs that can be applied to organizations. And they are about setting up that mindset that allows people the space to think outside of their personal box, to think outside of what they're currently doing to what they could be doing. It's really unlocking if you give it an opportunity to do it, and you can get really interesting answers and really interesting ideas from some of the most unexpected places sometimes, and that is often great. So I want to leave space for some other folks to weigh in on that one, but entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, and I think entrepreneurial, often people think of creating your own space, but there's also intrapreneurial, right? So doing that within an organization, you don't have to be the leader of an organization to do that. You can also do it within an organization. So, Michael, did you have a thought around that? I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Shira said. Sorry, now I'm always going to call you Shira. Is empathy and inclusive leadership. And those two things are such critical skills for us to embrace one another, not physically, although virtual hug to all of you, to create those inclusive spaces for all people. Very, very important to have empathy and practice an inclusive mindset.
Thank you. Did anyone want to add to that before I move on to our next audience question? Okay, there's a question from Katalali, and the question is, Katalali is currently working in an office and is not been able to work from home, despite having requested a day off to attend this event. They want to know about burnout. How do we avoid burnout? And that's a really big question, because a lot of people are feeling it, not only working from their office, but from home. Like, I think, that lack of division of space really leads to burnout. So what is burnout? How do we fix that?
Easy. Just fix burnout.
Big old small questions.
I'll jump in with a few ideas. First of all, is to recognize that it's happening. I think one of the things about burnout is that it tends to happen to people that are very passionate. So we don't notice the normal limitations that would shut us down. So when you're passionate about your family, you're going to go till 2 a.m. if they've got online schooling and you got to get that project done. When you care, you push yourself harder. We've heard stories of moms who can lift cars off of their children and get this Herculean strength when their kids are distressed. Well, that's fine for one day, but when you do that, and we've been lifting cars for a year now, we're tired, and it comes from a place of passion. So I think first is to be able to notice it, catch it, and to not be embarrassed by it, but to be able to actually ask for the help and the support that we need. You'd be amazed at how resistant or almost resentful people have gotten that other people haven't noticed that we're burning out or that we're overly burdened. And we can't expect other people to provide services to us if we don't give very specific asks. So whether that is like literally going to our HR department and saying, I am going to collapse if I don't get more holiday days. Can we not make some arrangements for more time off for me? Because my fear is the next thing coming is a short-term leave of absence because I've had a breakdown. So we have to really speak up and be heard that way. It may be asking family members, I can't do it all. Could somebody please pick up a load of laundry and send it back folded because I just can't get to that task this week. If you're somebody in a community and you see somebody struggling, step up and say, could I drop off some casseroles? Could I do a load of laundry? Would you like me to do Zoom reading with your daughter so that you can get an hour of quiet time for yourself? So I think we need to have eyes open for other people, but we also need to ask for what we're looking, the support that we need. It may mean going to our physicians and asking for referrals for mental health professionals or, talk therapy, group therapy, whatever those other resources might be. But if we're not aware of it and don't take action on it, we'll succumb.
Yeah. I think that piece around disclosure is really big. Reaching out and asking for help. There is a piece as well that is, the employer needs to create the space for that, but you also need to reach out and ask for it. So there's sort of like a two-pronged approach, if you will. Rena, did you want to throw some thoughts to that as well?
I just want to talk about burnout in general, and if I can even just say something a little bit spiritual in this professional conference, but meditate. I think for me, it's so important these days to lean into spirituality and to meditate and to journal and to take time away from my computer. I've even been connected with a therapist online where I'm just talking and expressing and sharing and just staying away from that nonstop need we have to create all the time. So I think we have to lean into our spirituality in a time like this.
100%. Yeah, I 100% agree. Michael, did you want to have a final thought there?
Yeah, there's just one thing I would encourage people to do, and that's self-care. Do whatever you need to do to take care of you, whether that's going for walks or singing or Netflix binging, but particularly for those who are working from home, are working in high-intensity jobs, you have to really make time for yourself. And that may seem selfish, but it's actually selfless because you are doing it for you, but ultimately it impacts everyone else.
Yeah, and I would say that self-care also speaks to that voice in our head, which is what meditation helps calm down. But, we talk to ourselves so critically critically, that a lot of our suffering is because we feel we're failing, we feel we're falling short, we feel we're not being responsible, living up to expectations. And it turns out the world's a lot more compassionate about how we're functioning than we are on ourselves. So if we can talk gently to ourselves, if we can convince ourselves we are good enough, we are doing fine, we're sufficient, we're being good enough parents, good enough workers. I think that those positive voices can quiet the more negative ones that bring our suffering.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I think that piece around self-care is super important. Know what your triggers are, know what your signals are that you need support or that you need to take a moment, and learn to fail forward, right? It's okay. Failure is not a bad thing. How can we fail forward? How can we learn from that? I think that's a really fantastic place to end off our conversation today. Thank you to our panelists for making the time to have this conversation, sharing your insights, and being vulnerable. I think we talked about some things that are quite personal. So we really appreciate everyone taking a moment. Please say thank you. And with that, we'll say good night, everybody. Oh, goodbye, everyone. Take care.
Wow, that was amazing. Thanks again to Shona, to Alison, to Michael, to Rena, and to JP for their insights. JP, you were an amazing moderator. And I just want to add that the work that you and Nikki and your team do over at Ryerson University to share ideas and collaborate and educate students and the wider community is awesome too. So thank you again.
Of course, thank you.
Now, and now let's all perhaps take a bit of time to reflect and to process what we've learned so far. We'll take about 15 to 20 minutes to chill and to mingle in the breakout hall. So this is your chance to network with and learn from your peers. Let's all mingle in that breakout hall, and then after that, Lee will be back on the main stage to introduce our next session, which is a discussion with a bunch of amazing leaders called The Future of Virtual versus Office.
Dio Gibson, Generation.
Cause I just touched down and I'm thinking about next. About to run it back and be up in the air. Bring the corner back, get the sack.